to State and Local. I'm Anne Marie Battistone, and of course you're watching Norfolk Public Access TV. This is my last interview with a candidate. There is one candidate in a contested race that I have not interviewed. I contacted them and didn't hear anything back, so just so that you know. So this is my final, and this is Jennifer West, who is presently an associate member of the Planning Board, and she wants to be a full-time member. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're an associate member, and you just for a few months it's been, or how long has it been?
Just a few months. So I started in November, so not long at all.
Now, what drew you into the Planning Board? Because I mean, from my point of view, I mean, I would think it'd be something that would be, people are engineers or, people in the trades or something like that maybe. And so I was wondering what drew you into that, what you were interested in the Planning Board for.
Right, so that's actually why I wanted to be involved, is because it traditionally has been a lot of sort of engineering and planning, and I've learned through my current position that I've been in for the excuse me, the last 10 years, I've worked a lot with local communities, particularly in Rhode Island, with the planning departments, and I find that it's just so important to have really a multidisciplinary board and have not just the engineers or the architects, but people who have a variety of backgrounds that can look really objectively at some of the plans and say, is it balancing the needs of people and the environment? Is it protecting everything? So I feel like I saw how important it is to have a variety of backgrounds on the board, because they make really important land use decisions.
Now, your training is in environmental science?
Yes. Yes, so I have a bachelor's in environmental biology from State University of New York College at Oneonta, and then a master's in environmental sciences from University of Rhode Island.
Now, have you considered being on, or are you also on the Conservation Commission?
No, so that's an interesting question, because I was asked that when I was interviewing for the associate position. They said, it's interesting, why did you choose this? You sound like your background's a great fit for the Conservation Commission. And I said, not that I wouldn't enjoy being on the Conservation Commission at some point, but I think that folks with environmental backgrounds are really important to have on planning boards.
Right.
So that's why I decided, and that's who I've worked with the most in Rhode Island, and just found how important it is to have that perspective. So that's why I actually wanted to get that perspective in there on the planning board.
So there are three candidates for there are two positions open.
Yes.
Walter is the incumbent,
yes.
And then someone left, I assume. How did the other position become available?
Oh, Jeff Palumbo is not running for re-election.
That's right.
Unfortunately, because he was great.
Oh yeah, he was so good to me when I first started the show here in this town. Oh, he spent so much time with me. I was so nervous because I hadn't been on the air for like 16 or 17 years from when I was in Medfield, and he was so kind to me. I mean,
he
he's
really
an
is.
Extraordinary person.
He really is. He's one of the nicest people I think I've ever met,
oh, yeah.
And I really appreciate. And I ask him questions all the time, and yeah, he's
he
great.
He always has time for people.
Yes, absolutely.
So now, what can you tell us some more about yourself? How long you've been in Norfolk, and maybe something about some of your professional job, what you do now in Rhode Island?
Yes, so I have lived in Norfolk for 5 years. My boyfriend of 10 years and I were in Rhode Island for a little while, and then he got a job in Wellesley, so my working in Providence and his working in Wellesley, we needed to find some sort of happy medium, so we lived in Mansfield for a while, just rented, which we liked, and then one day we just said, we need more space. We were just in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment with our dog, and I said, I just need one more room. I said, let's just start looking. And then we realized how expensive it is to rent and how a lot of places don't allow pets. So we said, we might as well be paying a mortgage.
Right.
Maybe we should look. So that was interesting. So we just looked, at Norfolk and surrounding towns and just kind of fell in love with Norfolk. Just a great community character. It's a beautiful place. So, but I still work mostly in Providence for the Narragansett Bay Research Reserve. So we're a federal state partnership with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration,
yes.
NOAA, and the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. So we actually, our headquarters are on Prudence Island, Rhode Island, which is right in the middle of the bay, of Narragansett Bay. And we,
So is there a ferry that takes you?
Yes.
Oh!
So you can only get there by private boat or ferry.
Get out.
Yes, it's a big production, but it's a beautiful place, and we manage over 4,400 acres of estuarine land and water, and then, so we do long-term education, research, stewardship. So I run our coastal training program, and that's to get the science-based information and tools and training to decision makers to help them make better decisions about land use planning and other things to best protect the watershed and the bay, and also the community character of their towns.
That sounds like a great job. Now, what do you do in the winter?
Oh, well, I don't
do
get
they have
to
an
go
alternative
out.
office on?
We do, so we have space at the Department of Environmental Management in Providence, in the Foundry in Providence. It's right downtown, right near Providence Place Mall. Yep. So we have space there because they're our state partner, and I spend a lot of time there because I work so much with the decision makers on the mainland, and then all my partners are on the mainland. So I can't really do my job out on the island. I love to get out there, but I do feel sorry for my coworkers traveling out there in the dead of winter because it can be brutal.
Well, they must have to close down out there, don't they?
No.
Aren't there ice flows?
There are, but we still have to do
my
work out there. We
God.
do water quality monitoring 365 days a year, and so it's always open.
Now, where do they come out from? Do they leave from Riverside?
The ferry is from Bristol.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So so it's quite the commute. You know, most of my coworkers live in the West Bay in Rhode Island, so they need to get to Bristol, get on a ferry, get off the ferry, get in another vehicle, go to the lab.
Right,
So it makes for a long day, but it's definitely an interesting place, beautiful place.
Now, as an associate, have you been able? You cannot vote. How does that work?
Right.
But you have input.
Yes, and the board is really great about asking for my input, even if I can't vote. So really, the associate member is there in case of absence or if somebody has to recuse themselves and things like that. There's also, for special permits, you need a supermajority vote. So associate members can actually vote on the special permits.
Now, what is a supermajority? What does that consist of?
4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, depending on the
80%.
town. But you have to have, it has to be more than just 3 out of 5.
Right.
So yes, so the associate can vote on those, and then in other circumstances.
Are you the only associate member?
Yes.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Yep.
Now, could you talk about some of the discussions or the projects over there that you felt you contributed to, and maybe tell us a little bit about that, if there was one that was particularly interesting to you, or?
Yes, definitely. I haven't been on board too long, but I have seen a couple projects go in, and one of them in particular was an open space residential development, which is nice. So it's nice that the town has that bylaw. So when you get residential subdivisions, they're really required to have, a certain percentage of the site be open space.
You must be talking about that almost like a little community of its own that they were talking about putting in. Because I read something in the in the Norfolk Rentham paper, and I was going to see if that person in charge of that might come in and talk about it. But it sounded like there was a center where the houses were going to be sort of built around. There would be a center where there would be a green space in the center. Boyd's Crossing.
Right. Were they calling it the Pocket Neighborhood or something?
Yes, I believe so.
I saw that in the paper. And that hasn't come, I haven't seen that yet come before the board since I've been there. But I read about that, and it's nice to see that the town encourages that. So it's come a long way, it seems, from now that there's mixed-use zoning districts to try to concentrate growth there instead of sort of sprawling throughout the town. And then when there are residential subdivisions, there's this open space residential development bylaw where so they can preserve more open space and things
So it
like
would be
that.
like
So
a
it's
little park for those houses.
Right, so it depends. I'm still learning all of the intricacies in Massachusetts. I'm really familiar with Rhode Island. It's called conservation development there, but you actually there you're required to preserve at least 50% of the site that could otherwise be developed. So that's aside from wetland,
Really?
slope, everything.
Well, that's quite a bit,
At
isn't
least,
it?
yes, at least 50%, and then you arrange the houses obviously on flexible lots and more compactly so that you have this meaningful open space that the residents can enjoy, and sometimes they can grant access to the public. It just depends on the terms of the easement, because
Right.
you have to put an easement on that conservation easement on that property so that you're preserving the features that you want to preserve, and you can decide then if you want public access or just access for the residents. So,
Now, do you know anything about the discussions around the run and gun?
a little bit,
Because,
not
I mean, you
really.
mentioned zoning.
Mhm.
And I mean, I used to have, thank God no longer, but I used to have somebody across the street from me who was a landscaper who was sawing logs, had massive, multiple piles of firewood, noise all day long, Sunday, you name it, trucks coming and going, but thank goodness they're gone. Then you've got up there, they're selling beef, which I don't know where that's being slaughtered, and honey and eggs, and then further up. So, I mean, I feel bad for those people. I mean, what do you have to do? I mean, I understand they have an agricultural deed, but I mean, you go to buy a house, and what do you have to do then? Go around and look at everybody's deed to find out if you're going to have that, be faced with that. And of course, they've moved a tremendous amount of earth. I don't know whether they've just shoved it to the back, 'cause there's huge boulders in the back there, but right now they're working on the arena. And so, I mean, what about the zoning up there?
So, right, so
what
they,
do they
yeah, if it's a business district or business or commercial, there's obviously quite a bit
clear,
more that
yes.
can happen. For residential, it's interesting you mentioned that. For residentially zoned districts, sometimes people use their property in different ways, and they may not actually legally be allowed to. But a lot of folks do it. We're actually working on something in Rhode Island right now called working to maintain working farms and forests. So realizing that in New England, there's often been these sort of what people consider traditional uses on their land that now may seem a little bit incompatible with residential use, but some of them are perfectly acceptable to the neighbors and actually contribute to the local economy, and it's providing the homeowners with enough income so that they don't have to sell off their large forest tract or their farm to development. So we're actually working with the town to create zoning that, well, it's basically performance criteria, performance measures, so that you're not necessarily restricting all uses. You're saying maybe some of these things are allowed if they're not offensive to the rest of the neighborhood, and what we'll do is assign sort of performance criteria to them. So noise levels, traffic levels, all of those. So you assign those criteria so that once they exceed those, then you probably can't be doing it in that zone. So it's interesting that I'm not.
Was run and gun ever discussed in the planning board while you were there?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I know much the zoning board of appeals
Right.
must have been the one, but I mean, I'm way down about a quarter of a mile up from the cemetery on Seacon, and I can hear the gunfire, reports of gunfire, as you might call it. But folks up there, I mean, and if they're going to have an arena, I assume they're going to be horse trailers, and there's going to be parking, and there's going to be this and that.
Yes, I know. I'm not sure.
Man, oh,
I've read
man.
a little bit in the papers. That's definitely a zoning board of appeals issue
Well, I guess
that they're
there's
dealing
things they're
with.
going forward with. Seems like they're going forward with everything.
Yeah, yep.
up
So
there.
it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out and how it's enforced and what happens. So I kind of
Well,
hear about it and read about it when I can, but it's not really under our purview as
right.
the planning board.
Now, so you've been in 5 years. Have you been on any other boards or done any other kind of community service activities that you might want to mention?
Since I've been here, it just
Takes a while to get settled.
Yeah, I think so. And when you work full time, it's
that's
it's
true.
hard. I was a little bit hesitant to get too involved just because I, have a full time job. But of course, a lot of volunteers do, which is why it's so amazing that you have such good volunteers in towns. But I decided to get involved by interviewing for the associate position because I feel like I have enough experience in my job now that I can bring a lot of that to the responsibilities of the board, and I can learn a lot. So I'm also on the Community Preservation Committee
Oh, yes.
as the planning board representative. So that's where I am now. We'll see what the future brings if I get involved with more things.
Again, not to bring up run and gun again, but I mean, talk about community preservation. I mean,
Right.
So is there anybody else on the board now that would bring your skills and your knowledge to the board that's already on there? Would you be the the first person with this kind of a background, or the only person?
I believe I am the only one with as much of an environmental science background, both education and work experience. I know that I think the board members are really knowledgeable and very thoughtful and considerate when it comes to environmental impacts of development, and just they are very knowledgeable about it. But I know, there's somebody's an architect and somebody else is actually into real estate development, and so there's a lot of great skill sets, but I do believe that I'm the only one with this amount of environmental background.
Now, prior to you showing up, did they defer to the Conservation Commission when they were going through plans? Do you happen to know, or maybe you don't know that?
Conservation commissions, they absolutely they need to be involved whenever there's any impact to wetlands or within a certain distance of a wetland. So they are the permitting authority for that. If there's no wetlands involved, it doesn't necessarily need to go through the Conservation Commission. But I think from what I've seen so far, the boards are quite good at communicating with each other and getting in touch with the people that they need to get questions answered.
Now, if you were elected, would you be able to step in if when they might have gone to the Conservation Commission?
What do you
understand
mean,
what I'm saying? In other words, in lieu of them having to go to the Conservation Commission if there was a wetlands issue, would they now be able to rely on you?
No, they'd still have to go just through the Conservation Commission if it was
Because they do the licensing.
Because they do the permitting specifically for the for wetlands. So, and I mean, we could certainly do our best to make suggestions as to how the development should be arranged on the site so that it's as least impactful as possible. But they still, if they're anywhere near a wetland or in a wetland buffer, they need to go through Conservation Commission.
I went to a meeting once because there was an issue, and I haven't seen them for at least a year or the last 2 years. There were turtles trying to cross the road. And so there were some signs put up, although oddly enough, over on Seekonk Street, where I've never seen any turkeys walking on the road, I mean, they're in the backyards, there's a turkey sign just north of the train crossing. But, and I was shocked. I imagine they had more to do with wildlife.
Yeah.
And then I'm listening to this, and it's this, and it's that, and I was just amazed.
Yes, they're
And what they were actually dealing with.
Yes, it's primarily wetlands, but they also, and I don't want to misspeak because I'm more used to Rhode Island, conservation commissions in Rhode Island don't have wetland permitting authority. The state does it. So the conservation commissions are really, they do focus more on open space, critical habitat, wildlife, where does it exist?
I see.
How can we work with the other boards to protect it? And
Yes.
they advise the planning board and the town council, et cetera. Here, Massachusetts conservation commissions have a lot of power, for lack of a better word, in that they actually make permitting decisions about wetlands. But I haven't been to the Norfolk Conservation Commission meeting, but they may take into consideration all those other things as well. I know that they're involved with generally, looking at potential acquisitions for open space and important habitats and things like that.
Well, they did put up those signs. And now, so you have a master's in environmental science?
Yes.
Now, what did you do a thesis?
I did.
Or senior, could you talk about that?
Yes, I actually studied Phragmites Australis, which is called common reed. It's a very invasive plant, and you've probably seen it.
The purple one.
It
grows in the rivers?
Yes, so in the fall, it's
a
actually beautiful, really tall.
It's a spiked.
Yes, and it has that beautiful, in the fall, that beautiful purple inflorescence, and it grows in the dense stands in both freshwater environments and estuarine or brackish environments, and also like just in ditches on the side of roads and everything. So it's quite invasive, and I looked at bird usage of it because I worked with at a site that was that's owned by the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, and in a very sort of densely developed coastal area. And the residents wanted to start removing it, but technically, even though it's an invasive species, you can't just go out and start annihilating it. You need to get a wetlands permit. And they said, hold on, before we do anything, we should see if any wildlife is using it, since that's really the mission of the Audubon Society.
Now, so did they contact the university? How did you find out
about
it?
Yeah, they contacted my major professor and said, do you have any students who'd be willing to do this? It just sounded like a good fit for a master's project.
That was good for you.
So it was neat. So I went out there and I looked for birds and I recorded everything, and then I just did a ton of research on Phragmites and control methods.
What's the common name of that plant?
Common reed.
Oh, okay. Oh, you did say.
Yeah. Yes. So.
And you wouldn't think common reed would have such a beautiful flower.
I know, and it is quite lovely in the fall, especially. So that's what I didn't. But it was neat because I really got to dig into. Yes, it's an invasive species, and yes, in a lot of environments we do want to remove it. But in this environment, it's a really heavily impacted coastal area. And it was probably the only thing keeping the coastal pond clean and from eroding away. Because it actually is used in Europe for wastewater treatment.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So it actually takes up a ton of nutrients. So I said,
and the birds, do they eat the flowers, or what do the birds do?
So it does restrict bird usage to a degree, but I still found that some things were using it basically for nesting and shelter and things like that.
Right.
But I found nesting black-crowned night herons, which are these beautiful wading birds that I didn't expect to see, but they are able to nest in the Phragmites because the culms are so strong. So they would actually, because they usually nest in trees.
Right.
So they could so it's interesting. While you're not getting many of the traditional species in that area, you're seeing other things. And it was, I think, getting enough wildlife usage and the other benefits of clearing the water and holding the sediment so it wasn't washed away in storms.
I never heard that about the water.
So
now, so what did you do? Did you sort of have to camp out in a little place there and spend, hours and come back and forth, or did you have like a little tent, or what did you?
Well, luckily it wasn't that big, so I didn't have to really camp out. But I would go weekly at least for, through the breeding season, and I would take, I'm not an expert birder, I wish I was, but I would take my expert birder friends and they would help me identify. But there was really just sort of 3 vantage points, so I would just go out and we would survey, for maybe a couple hours. So it wasn't super intensive.
Well, that was wonderful that came your way.
Yeah, it was neat.
Because the uniqueness of that was the area. I mean, and that I'm sure that has been studied. That plant's been studied a lot. But in your case, you were able to have this thesis for this area.
Yes, and that was what was nice, is that I was able to, as much as I could, not necessarily make recommendations as I was just a grad student, but just saying from what I researched about Phragmites and what I see at this site and all the interviews I've done with experts, it seems as though you're probably going to want to leave it, at least in these areas, for these reasons. And so Audubon was able to take that information, and then the fire district there that owns, you know, the right-of-ways and the roads and everything, they were afraid it was a fire hazard. So then I was able to at least give them some information, right? Give them some information and recommendations to say, you know, to influence their decision making. So that was neat, right? So it wasn't just studying the plant; it was studying the impacts at a location. So
right.
That
Well,
was
that's the
neat.
whole idea of. I mean, that must have been a big part of. I would have to have been a part of your as an environmental science.
Right.
Graduate student. Well, we've just about run out of time, but this has been very interesting, very enlightening to talk to you.
Good.
And good luck.
Thanks.
And
Thank
thank you so much. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for watching State and Local. My guest was Jennifer West. She is presently an associate member of the Planning Board, and she's running for one of the 2 seats that are available. And don't forget, now the election is on May 3rd, and I believe it's at the Kennedy School. I hope I'm right about that. I think somebody would be saying something if I weren't. And so thank you again. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with some more shows. And again, please support Norfolk Public Access TV. I'm Anne Marie Battistone.